Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living thing that moves on the ground." The preceding verses, Genesis 1:26 through 28, come from the New International Version translation of the Bible. The English Standard Version and New King James Version use the word dominion rather than rule. These verses are the foundation of what has been called the creation mandate, the cultural mandate, or the dominion mandate. Neville Carr, current chair of the Academic Board of Eastern Colleges and chair of the Ethics Committee of the Christian Research Association, divides this mandate into 4 components: community building, economic production and creation care, mean-making or knowledge-seeking, and rest and worship. Focus here will be on creation, which is part of Carr's second component. What is the dominion mentioned in Genesis 1? We'll start with interpretations from 2 Christian leaders. First, Pastor Mark Chanski of Harbor Reformed Baptist Church in Michigan. Chanski authored the books Manly Dominion and Womanly Dominion, published by Calvary Press in 2007 and 2008. In an interview with Robert Sagers, a regular guest blogger at the Gospel Coalition, he said this about dominion: "A man of dominion seeks to boldly subdue and rule over the circumstances of his life, instead of passively permitting the circumstances of his life to subdue and rule over him. He dominates his environment instead of letting his environment dominate him." Chanski continued, "God had just taken the chaos of a formless and void world, in the space of 6 days, fashioned it into an orderly and very good creation. An image-bearing man of dominion imitates his God. He subdues, brings into bondage, makes to serve him by force, and rules, governs, reigns, and holds sway over the spheres, earth, sea, sky, around him. A man of dominion is boldly active." Next, we have Aaron Armstrong, former brand manager at the Gospel Project, a Christ-centered chronological Bible study curriculum. Answering the question of how human beings should exercise dominion, Armstrong wrote, "When we talk about dominion, it's helpful to think of it this way. As God's image bearers in creation, we are intended to act as his representatives. We were designed in a very real way to show the world what God is like. So when God gave us the command to rule over the earth, the expectation was to do so in a way that reflected his character. Maybe an illustration would help. When I ask a babysitter to watch my kids, I don't say, 'Go to town, run amok, do whatever you want.' I expect the babysitter to maintain the rules our family has in place. She is to act as a representative, albeit in an extremely limited sense, of my wife and me." Armstrong went on to describe the current state of the earth under human dominion. "As we can see just looking out our windows, it's clear we're not living in a paradise. There are some wondrous things in our world, no question, but let's be honest, it's a mess. In the beginning, the ground yielded its fruit gladly to the man. Work wasn't toil. But when man sinned, God put him under a curse, and everything, including the earth, was affected. So rather than yielding fruit easily, the earth rebelled against the man, giving him thorns and thistles instead of the fruit of his labors. And somewhere along the way, we decided to put our proverbial foot down. Our water became polluted. The soil was leached of its valuable nutrients. Forests were cleared and farmland replaced with sprawling housing developments for dwindling populations to not live in. Numerous animal species are either threatened or on the verge of extinction. Are you getting the picture? Rather than using our dominion to cultivate the earth, we've chosen to conquer it instead. There's a distinct difference in tone between Mark Chanski and Aaron Armstrong in these passages. Chanski emphasizes conquering, using warrior imagery, while Armstrong emphasizes cultivating, using domestic examples and looking to the earth. One appeals to stereotypically masculine traits, the other to stereotypically feminine traits. Unsurprisingly, the latter dovetails with the call of environmentalism. The association of environmentalism with femininity is not unfamiliar. For example, in a recent series of studies exploring how gender conformity or nonconformity influence perceptions about men and women practicing pro-environmental behaviors, researchers from Penn State found that an individual engaging in pro-environmental behaviors was more likely to be viewed as more feminine, regardless of their gender. Authors of the article Is Eco-Friendly Manly termed this the green feminine stereotype, writing that among the reasons for the pairing are the use of more feminine than masculine font styles and colors for pro-environment messages, the greater marketing efforts for pro-environment products in areas more commonly involving women than men, and the ethics of care and conservation that are foundational to environmentalism, and in seemingly closer alignment with prototypical feminine traits. Green behavior is consistently defined as something that women do. Regarding biblical dominion, a masculinist lens has been dominant, and that reality affects our actions alongside or against the creation. While both masculinist and feminist focuses have value in our assessments of the interactions between human and non-human creation, there has historically been less mind paid to the feminist focus. Turning to it and balancing the two may provide us a fuller view of God's intention for mankind in exercising dominion. In classical Hebrew, the language in which the book of Genesis was written, the word for subdue, kavash, figuratively means that a people or nation are brought into submission or control. The word is used in God's commands to Adam and Eve, in reference to their interaction with the earth. The word for have dominion, radah, means descend, go down, wander, and spread, implying rule by joining the subjects. The word is used in reference to humankind's interactions with the living creatures. Its meaning might bring to mind the self-sacrificial work of Christ, who took the form of a human man and walked as a flesh and blood creature for over 30 years, a king submitting himself to be a servant for his subjects. Dr. Ellen Davis, a biblical scholar focused on the impact of biblical interpretation on faith communities and their responses to issues like ecological crisis, translate this line as, "Let us make mankind in our image, according to our likeness, so that they may exercise skilled mastery among the fish of the sea and among the birds of the air," etc. Dr. Theodore Hibert, who holds a PhD in classical Hebrew and Hebrew scriptures and is the current Francis A. McGaw Professor of Old Testament in McCormick Theological Seminary, notes that by using the verb radah, this biblical text does grant humans the right and responsibility to rule, to govern the rest of creation, and establishes a hierarchy of power and authority in which the human race is positioned above the rest of the natural world. Elsewhere in the Old Testament, this verb is used to refer to the rule of the head of the house over servants, and the rule of Israel's kings over Israel's enemies. Radah itself is a neutral term. It does not imply either benevolence or malevolence by itself. However, its Old Testament use is mostly in relation to rule over enemies, which has a decidedly more antagonistic tinge. Kavash, too, has a hierarchical, backed social context. In the pre-industrial biblical world, according to Dr. Hybert, a more masculinist interpretation may have been regarded as appropriate because humans were approaching nature from a severely disadvantaged position. In the industrial modern world, however, heavy machinery and the fossil fuels that ran or run them have placed humans at an incredible and risky advantage. The transition from an agricultural environment to an industrial environment, at least in the Western world, calls for not a denunciation of the masculinist interpretation wholesale, but an acknowledgement that its applicability to how humans interact with the environment, given new technologies, has changed. That isn't to say that human activities didn't disturb and or harm the environment prior to mechanization. Rex Weiler, director of the original Greenpeace Foundation and co-founder of Greenpeace International, points to hints of ecological awareness in the humans and legends of early human record, and the observations in early human civilizations, such as the Indus in modern-day Pakistan and the Greeks on the effects of pollution, deforestation, soil erosion, and acid contamination on environmental and community health. Nor is this to say that environmental stewardship was not a concern or responsibility until the 18th centuries, at least in the West. It is to say that mechanization has, 1, exponentially increased the extent to which a small group of humans, or even a single human, can transform the environment for good or for ill, and 2, made more critical the case for environmental stewardship. Consequently, the fulfillment of the dominion mandate of Genesis 1:28 in our world has diverted attention to a different interpretive lens. Whether the modern environmental movement is considered feminine because it has a large gender imbalance tilted toward women, or the large gender imbalance tilted toward women exists because environmentalism itself is considered feminine, is a question for the sociologists. The result, either way, is the cognitive linking by both men and women of femininity with greenness, and thus the aversion of some from the type of dominion understanding expressed by Aaron Armstrong. The exercise of dominion that has driven species extinction and endangerment, polluted air, water, and soil, crashed populations and biodiversity, and disturbed habitats in the last century and a half is one that tumbles into extremes that include oppression and exploitation, and that pulls us back to the realization that, in its highest form, dominion includes responsible governance and stewardship. It does not remove humanity from the seat of governments, of rule, on which it has been placed as agents and representatives of God on earth, but it does moderate human power and devote much more time and effort to cultivation over conquering.